people are skeptical of like messaging from, corporations, but they trust, real people. So for our numbers for shares per active users, it went up by 540%. Biggest lesson I would say is building a community. Our earned media value went up by 660%. I didn't want to do like everything all at once, so I wanted to just focus on employees. Our content reach grew exponentially, and I'm still, shocked by the numbers.
Welcome to the Employee Advocacy and Influence podcast. My name's Lewis Gray. My co-host is Elliot Elsley, and our special guest for today's episode is Michela Di Giorgio Martin from the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants. It's been a bit of a running joke in the lead up to this recording that I was going to get that name incorrect, and I'm delighted to say that this is only the second take. So before I stumble again, Michela, would you mind just introducing yourself and your role for our listeners?
Yes, of course. So hello to everyone. I'm Michela, and I'm currently the lead manager for AICPA and CIMA. Specifically, I work in the social media team focusing on employee advocacy and influencer marketing. So it's basically the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants. It's the global organization behind AICPA and CIMA. The AICPA serves certified public accountants in a range of sectors and supports students considering accounting careers. CIMA serves management accountants who are CGMA qualified and people seeking to become qualified. Together, we helped hundreds of thousands of accounting and finance professionals around the world grow their skills and lead in business.
Amazing. Thank you so much for giving us that introduction. I think it's always helpful for the listeners to have context. And just on that as well, obviously we're here today to talk about your employee advocacy program. Could you just give us a high-level overview of the employee advocacy program that you're managing at the moment?
Yes, of course. Our advocacy program actually includes employees and members of our professional organization. In fact, our members are some of our most enthusiastic volunteers. We know that people have jobs and other commitments, so we use our advocacy program to try to make sharing AICPA and CIMA resources and content as easy as possible.
So we're going to be talking about a few things today. And for the listeners' context, we invited Michela onto the podcast today initially because our amazing editor, Selena, saw Employee Advocacy Queen listed in Michela's LinkedIn headline. And I'm absolutely delighted to say after our initial conversation that you're certainly living up to that title. So a couple of things that the listeners can expect. We're going to be talking about the pilot that Michela ran and how that shaped the employee advocacy program into what it is today. Going to be talking about how she embedded employee advocacy into the internal tools that they have at the moment and how Michela and her colleagues increased earned media value by 100% or over 100% year on year. So I guess the natural place to start is just understanding advocacy's origins at the organization. So Michela, what prompted you to launch or to explore and then launch an employee advocacy program in the first place?
So basically in 2024, we started to focus a lot on social media as a whole. And we wanted to really have members and staff get involved with sharing our messages, resources, and news in accounting and finance. So many of them are happy and enthusiastic about helping us, amplifying our messaging. So we definitely thought we should use advocacy to help us out with that.
And I guess as part of that, and maybe not to dive too quickly into the content strategy of all of this, that's a perpetually changing landscape, right? Everything that's going on in the accounting world, the laws, regulations, rules, best practice, that's constantly shifting. Is that the sort of content that's kind of we're encouraging people to be talking about regularly?
Yeah, so, like breaking news, updates on laws, regulations with like tax, and even like I mentioned earlier, like resources for CPA pathways and CGMA pathways. So it's a little bit of everything.
A big part of, sharing a lot of that content as opposed to from a corporate page, but via an employee, it really helps demonstrate expertise in the space, I would presume. Is that a big kind of aspect of the program and the value of it?
Yes, I would agree. We do have like a lot of subject matter experts, in our organizations, and it's really great for them to, to share out and put out their thoughts as well behind like what we're putting out on, social media.
And you mentioned, Michela, in our initial conversation that you treated 2024 as almost like a pilot. So, what were the biggest hurdles you faced in the first year?
So, yeah, it was a pilot and it was a lot of learning as I was going and just like trying out different things and hoping that, that they would stick. One of the biggest hurdles I think during the pilot was just trying to get new users onto the platform and having them being active and sharing.
And just in terms of measuring performance, because I agree, I think a pilot's a fantastic way to just iron out those creases before you try to scale things. But how did you determine whether or not the pilot had been successful? So, what were you actually hoping to see and achieve during that time?
So 2024 was a pilot and we did set up goals. And as time went on, like I was noticing that more people were sharing and each month our numbers for sharing was increasing. And our hope was to get more people involved with like signing up, onboarding and sharing.
When you looked at that initially, something I've seen a lot over the years is people launch a pilot, they have some kind of metrics in mind, which might be like usage or total shares. A lot of people tend to then suddenly change those metrics and they go, actually, what I was initially looking at isn't the most important element. And I want to look at, as an example that comes up quite often, like engagement rate and things like that, more kind of ratioed metrics. Do you find the numbers that you initially launched the pilot with, were they the ones you stuck with the whole way through, or did you find you kind of started to change the goals a little bit?
I did. I changed the goals because I started to look at total shares in 2024. And then in 2025, I kind of moved it to active shares per user instead of total shares. And then I did focus a lot in 2025 on earned media value compared to 2024. I think 2024, I was just looking at how many users we had and the total shares.
Yeah, I think that's such a classic approach to take. I think it's actually a good approach to take generally, is like you start with almost like, is this thing on? Like,
Yeah.
let's just get some people using this. Let's get some buttons being pressed, and hopefully we hit some degree of volume in the button pressing. The next year is when you go, okay, right, now I actually want to get good at this and I want to optimize. Shares per active user is such a great metric for anybody that is listening that doesn't use that metric. Very important average, because it means for every time we add somebody, we know how many times on average they're going to share,
Yeah.
and we get to scale that out across an entire business, particularly for a big business. It's a big one.
And was the leadership team involved in the program during the pilot phase?
I would say that they were very active and they were involved with, like helping launch the pilot for advocacy.
Okay. If you don't mind me asking, how did you get the leadership team involved with the process? Is this something you had to kind of, sell to them, or was it something they just naturally gravitated to?
So I have to say that I was in a very great position because the leadership team was very heavily involved in like social media and how to help, increase numbers and to push more on social media. So they were already very open to advocacy, and I didn't really have to, like budge or do anything like that. They naturally gravitated towards it, and they were, open to communicate to the whole organization about it.
That's great to hear. It's definitely it's a fortunate position to be in for sure, but it's something that we're hearing more and more now. I think the tide is definitely changing on executives just understanding the importance of having a presence online. But I don't doubt. I mean, maybe I'm wrong here, but was there a percentage of them who you had to support to boost their visibility online? Was there any additional training that some of them needed? I hate to use the phrase hand holding, so I try to avoid it, but you know what I mean?
It wasn't hand holding, but I think that seeing the value of social media and how important it is, there were a few of them that they wanted to have help in boosting their online presence. So one of the things that I did is, have one-on-one meetings to set up maybe, their profile on advocacy, and then helping them with becoming more active on social media. So besides sharing on advocacy, so kind of like, post this, like things that we're looking for, and just having like an open communication with them if they ever had any questions.
All those senior leaders, I would anticipate, or I guess, do they know kind of what they want to say? They just don't know how to kind of get it across. Is that the experience that you've had?
It's more of, like I want to be more active, like what are some ways? So just kind of telling them, maybe there's like an article that we have on our website and maybe you could put your thoughts on it, sharing like once a week. So not, like it doesn't have to be that you have to put, the cadence of posting, not every day, just like a few times. And then also like engagement online, just kind of portraying that, like liking, commenting, and like tagging people also like helps boost your visibility.
By the signs of things, you've got a leadership team that clearly understand the value of this already and who seem to be gravitating towards social media as opposed to gravitating away from it, which is the unfortunate reality for a few people that we've spoken on the podcast before. Do you think it had an impact when other employees or your colleagues saw executives using the platform in terms of, just how seriously they take it and then, onboarding in the future?
Yeah, of course. I think it definitely did help. It's great to hear when leadership is participating and then, like other employees seeing leaders using the platform definitely helped. And it made them see that they could also start sharing as well.
Quick one. If you've ever wondered how your employee advocacy efforts are actually performing and not just what you think is happening, Disseminate offers a free employee advocacy health check. All you have to do is provide your company name and our team will pull real social data on how active your employees are, what impact it's having, and then how you stack up against your chosen competitors. So whether you're assessing the performance of your employee advocacy program or getting a benchmark for a future program, these will be the insights you can act on. The link's in the show notes. Well, I know obviously 2024 was a big year for your program. 2025, based on what we discussed in our initial conversation, was even bigger just in terms of performance. So I definitely want to unpack some of that. So I guess before we come into the results that you saw in 2025, can you tell us a little bit about the advocacy onboarding experience? So we've talked about executives and getting them on board, but you mentioned that you have training and you offer one-to-one sessions for employees. Can you just unpack that a little bit for us?
Yes, of course. So, kind of like the onboarding experience, I basically put together a PowerPoint and like a few videos to help with like the training process, kind of like setting up the profile, how to add posts onto advocacy and how to share out onto their social media profiles. And I also, if I see that maybe someone needs a little bit of more help, I set up a one-on-one, call with them. And after everything is set up, I like to add I like to add them on a Teams channel that I created where anyone can like ask questions, bring up anything for advocacy. And if there is something that, like a breaking news post, I like to, put it in there and tell people like that this is up and maybe we should share it out. And then a fun part, we do have a leaderboard in our program. And you can kind of see like who's on the leaderboard, and everybody really loves competition, and they kind of like are in there saying, oh, who's in the number one spot? Maybe I need to be in the number one spot. I need to share more. So it's just a bit of fun as well.
I think having that dedicated comms channel is a really interesting thing to me. And the fact that you centralize this platform around yourself as well, which is like, hey, there's a Teams channel and you can ask me questions, and you can, if you have thoughts or opinions or questions, whatever it might be. There are quite a lot of companies out there that I guess hide behind the kind of like generalized, there's a marketing team that are responsible for this and you need to reach out to marketing. I think having that person that you can just reach out to and go, hey, I don't understand this button, or I don't understand what content I should be talking about because I'm new to the business, goes a really, really long way to like simplifying this for people. Do you find you get a lot more interaction from people through that channel?
I do. In 2024, I didn't have the Teams channel, and so in 2025, I put the Teams channel because I wanted to be a little, more available to everyone. I know a lot of people on advocacy, but there's, a lot of people that I've never worked with directly. So I just wanted to put myself out there and make myself reachable. And I think it definitely helped. And people, like reach out to me. And I think that there's less of a barrier now.
And just through that channel, Michela, what have been some of the most common questions that people are asking you? Is there anything that really stands out to you at all?
I think it's just like simple things, kind of like, oh, maybe I have to like reconnect my profile, like updates with like API and things like that. But mainly it's just, like, oh, there's this post, like we should share it out. And a lot of it has now become, like I mentioned before, like the leaderboard. So there's a lot of that discussion. And I also like to, thank people as well for their hard work and sharing. And I like to share out numbers periodically. So that's what's been going on lately.
And when you say about people saying that there's this post we should share, is that people coming to you and just suggesting content to add to the advocacy platform for everybody to share?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. Sometimes it's me and sometimes it's other people, just saying like, can this be added, or there's this post that should be shared, and vice versa.
That's amazing. I mean, I don't think you need a stronger signal that something has really been ingrained into the culture. If you've got, especially if it's, within the marketing team, people coming to you and saying, hey, we really want to push this as part of this campaign. Can this go into the advocacy platform? It's nice to see it just being treated as not just a campaign, but, it's one of our channels. It's social, it's LinkedIn, it's advocacy. But, I spoke about the performance and I've alluded to some numbers, but how did the second year, so 2025, perform compared to that first year in 2024 in terms of performance?
So the second year has yielded higher results, and I'm still, shocked by the numbers. So our total shares went up, and our audience that our content reach grew exponentially. So for our numbers for shares per active users, it went up by 540%. And our earned media value went up by 660%. And these numbers are very high. And as I mentioned, 2024 was a pilot year, and we didn't have, many users and not many people were sharing.
You mentioned about the Microsoft Teams channel, but something that really stood out to me in that initial chat was just, again, as I said at the top of the episode, how you'd embedded this into so many of your internal communications. And you mentioned newsletters, which I think was a fascinating one. So can you tell our listeners a little bit about that?
Yeah, so, like in 2024, it was, the pilot year. And one of the things, from leadership was just like adding more, information about the advocacy program and like internal communications, which is kind of, like a newsletter that it's company wide. And then the other newsletter, I don't know if I'm mixing it up, that we have set up in our advocacy program, where basically each week users will get, like the top 5-6 posts in their categories, and then they can just share out directly from the email. So you don't even have to go into the platform itself to share.
Yeah, it's definitely something that we see a lot. And I think Elliot's probably seen this a lot more than me. So I don't know if I mentioned this, but Elliot used to sit within our customer success team. And I believe that was around the time we released our newsletters functionality. But it was just a complete game changer because, like with the internal comms tools integrations, we'll integrate with Slack, Teams, etc. But just being able to meet people where they are in their inboxes, if you've got people who are just living in their emails, just being able to send them content there and they can share it from there. And if that's Teams, then it's Teams, but it's just a total game changer as the numbers reflected in 2025. And I just realized you're right. You spoke about two different kinds of newsletters in our initial conversation. So we didn't touch on this, but I'd love for you to explain how you did that during I think it was, you correct me if I'm wrong, but it was during the pilot, I think, where you had the internal newsletter that was kind of shouting about advocacy. Is that correct?
Yeah. So, trying to add more numbers of users, and just to kind of introduce what the advocacy program was, because it's something new and, people really, don't know what it is. So just kind of like talking about what the program is, how you can help out the association, and, like how you can sign up by reaching out to me. So that definitely helped out a lot, because people, would like ask me questions and ask me more about what the program is.
Yeah, I think that's an area that is really important to just keep going with as well. I think don't ever stop with those internal kind of conversations, even if it's posting about results and stuff like that. It's such a simple process to manage that, hey, we're just going to shout about it internally for all the people that have forgotten about it.
I agree. We also like to highlight people, that are doing amazing work, helping us out with the advocacy program and putting that in the internal communications as well. And that also helps, get more people asking questions and get interested into the program.
Well, Michela, something that I really wanted to touch on is the nuances of managing an employee advocacy program within the accounting space, because I know there's parts of the accounting, I'm kind of relating it to finance here. Finance is obviously very tightly regulated, and I know there are a number of aspects of the accounting industry that are as well. But just based on that, or whether for other reasons, how do you think employee advocacy is different within accounting compared to other sectors?
So, in my opinion, I think it shows up differently than other sectors, as there are a lot of, like regulation and laws, and things are always changing and updating. So it comes up more as thoughtful expertise. This shows up as, sharing regulatory changes, tax updates, market trends, and as other industries might have more of an informal approach.
So thinking about personal wins, program wins, and then looking ahead for what's next, obviously it's been a phenomenal 2 years for you. And at the time of recording, it's only early February 2026. So I'm sure you've got big plans for this year. But before we come on to that, what's the biggest lesson you learned from 2024 to 2025?
Biggest lesson, I would say, is building a community. And what I mean by that is bringing people in and helping, asking for help. Here at work, having, like my colleagues help me with, like the program, and like different, coming up with different solutions, and also reaching out for help with, people outside of the organization. I've found other people that are in the same role as me. I found them on LinkedIn, and just kind of sharing ideas and what worked for them. I think that was like my biggest lesson, is just like community, not just like thinking I can do this by myself, but having others help me as well.
That's amazing to hear. Yeah, and I definitely encourage you to go through our list of previous guests as well, because you'd be surprised how many times we've heard something like that. A lot of people feel, I guess, because employee advocacy is quite a new tactic, whether it's for employer branding or marketing, a lot of people feel they're alone within the organization when they're trying to get something like this off the ground. But like I say, so many people that we've spoken with are feeling the exact same way. And hopefully, this podcast is doing a job of changing that, and, making you feel like you're not alone in this process. But what's the vision for the program going forward then? What do you hope to achieve this year?
This year, my goal is to increase users overall, and to have more AICPA and CIMA members join us. We already do have volunteers involved, but we're always looking to expand and want to increase those numbers.
Getting those third-party individuals that, I guess, they're advocates for the business in their own way. Is that a challenging exercise, trying to bring them into the fold, or is it generally kind of like the hand raisers, the people that are excited about it, that you find just naturally funnel in?
So we do work with some volunteers, and they were eager to join, but in last year I kind of wanted to focus on employees mainly, because it's just kind of learning the ways that I could like communicate with people and how to build that. And I wanted to, I didn't want to do like everything all at once. So I wanted to just focus on employees. And then this year I wanted to like venture out and use more of like our members, and see like what ways I could use to like communicate with them and have them share and be excited about it.
Do you envisage sort of co-mingling those two groups, or do you think you'll kind of split them out, be it in function within the tool that you're using, or a completely separate tenant in itself? Or do you think actually it works if everybody's kind of looking at the same content and the same information?
I think I'm going to put them in have them have the same content as everybody else, so we can have like one cohesive messaging. But what I'm like mostly excited is that maybe something is not an advocacy that for them is important, and having them add that in, I think that that's going to be great, because maybe I'm missing something that I'm not seeing from a member perspective.
And so I guess we're thinking about the industry as a whole at the moment, but even just outside of accounting, based on everything that you're seeing on social media right now, why do you think employee advocacy is so important today?
I think it's important as it shows the trust between the company and the people, like working there or supporting the company. People are skeptical of like messaging from, corporations, companies, but they trust, real people. And then when employees or members share their experiences, perspective, it feels authentic. And that is something that can't be replicated.
I love that. Naturally, I couldn't agree more as well. And, I've kind of alluded to this when I said about the state of social media right now. Obviously, we can't talk about that without mentioning AI to some extent. But just one question I had for you on that. Have you explored using AI to support content creation or personalization?
Great question. So our platform actually has some AI features that are, embedded into advocacy, which definitely helps me out a lot. Especially if I have to like add a post in and have to create like write a caption for it for everybody to share out. So that definitely like helps me out. Obviously, like I double check and, make sure everything is good, but it definitely helps out with that. And then we also have like another, tool that helps with scheduling posts for users. So if you don't want to share out right that instant, you can actually schedule your post to be shared out at a later date and even time.
I always think this is going to be the use case for AI. It's always going to be soft touch. I don't think personally, and I suspect Lewis would agree with this, we don't want AI writing content for all of our employees and sort of sapping the soul out of it to some degree. But the tweaks, the changes, the ways of working that can speed things up for people, I always see it as almost ideation. If it suggests, from our perspective, that disseminate captions can be suggested based on an understanding of like my personal voice, essentially how I would talk, how I would post. It's never going to be 100% if I really want to focus on it, but it's a really, really good starting point. And if it does 80% of the structure for me to tweak, I think that goes a really, really long way for us from an AI perspective. But I live in fear of AI just doing all the work, because then at that point, it's all just noise, in my opinion.
I think it's a great tool to use. But I don't, like you said, it takes out away from like the creative perspective of content. But
I think ideation is probably the best way to put it, as you just mentioned, Elliot. But it's how I'll use it a lot of the time. It's kind of starting an idea or fleshing out an idea, something that I might typically do on paper and that might take me 30 minutes to do, can just be that little bit quicker with it. But it's just often just around structure and I guess idea generation, or don't even want to say generation, exploration, building on things, but then the finished product has to have your name written all over it, because it's becoming easier and easier to spot. Everybody, thought they had a handle on this by removing M dashes from their posts and things like that. But, there's new trends that are popping up all the time. There's all of these, I've seen people refer to it as AI accent, stuff like that. It's just becoming increasingly more easy to spot, but it just removes what makes employee advocacy so successful in the first place if it's not done correctly, and that's authenticity. People trust employees because they don't feel they can trust organizations anymore, or they just don't hear from them. Heaven only knows it's not particularly easy to get your company page seen on LinkedIn anymore, so employees are definitely the best way to break through the noise. So it's just about maintaining that authenticity. So final question for you then, Michela, and this is my favorite question to ask because we always get some great stories off the back of this, but what's the biggest win that you've seen from employee advocacy?
So biggest win, for me, it's the fact that we're not focusing on users, that have a high following on social media, but users that, would be considered like nano or micro influencers. I love that we're having employees share their thoughts, and that is valuable, and others want to learn more. And I'm excited to see like where this takes us in the future. And lastly, the way the advocacy program is using data, tracking, the different analytics and seeing what works and why.
I love that. You've seen some fantastic some fantastic results in terms of performance data, but I love that you're still focused on the authenticity. The fact that employers are adding their own spin on content is the biggest win for you. And I think that's definitely something to carry forward into the next year and beyond. So a great place to finish. I'd 100% go encourage all of our listeners to follow Michela on LinkedIn, just see all of the amazing work that she's doing there. But Michela, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciated the conversation.
Of course, likewise. Thank you very much, everybody. Catch you soon.